Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. This is my initial thoughts video for Lua. The first frame you see here is actually a quote she says in her intro video. If you do what I say, you can have everything your heart desires. And when I heard that and saw that, first things first, her English voice is incredibly good. Alright, it's very desirable. But after she said this, I'm just like, oh yeah, I really desire you, baby. No, for real though, Lua is I mean, she doesn't have like the, you know, the big booba like ML Vivian and like Arya and all that stuff, but she's honestly very beautiful. And if you did like a frame by frame animation kind of walkthrough, it's all like quite desirable. Her like character design has always been really good. A lot of people have been, you know, eyeing her from the story, but from like the previews and stuff, and we were always like kind of looking forward to her being released, right? So at the time, I think some people were theorizing that, oh, maybe she's the ML5, like the end of chapter boss. She doesn't turn out to be that. Some people have said that people who have actually read the story said that Zio is definitely looking more like the ML5 boss. And based on the montage video we got about a month ago, right before the Full Metal Alchemist collab, we did get to see a preview of Zio being the last character shown in that montage video, and based on a lot of people's speculation that he might be the ML5 boss. Regardless, Lua, I just fought her in the current chapter, and she was annoying to fight. Now, is she gonna be annoying in her actual kit here and for PvP? Let's talk about that. So again, I love her design. I think she reminds me of Bologna. So green Bologna, and then, you know, therefore SSB as well, so some Seaside Bologna. That she's like kind of dressed humbly. She doesn't have like a lot of skin showing, but yet still quite sexy, so I kind of like that. But to preface this video, I wanted to bring attention to something that I was reminded of, you know, discussing with my viewers and on Discord and all that stuff. I was reminded of a video that I did about a year ago now. So this is a screenshot of when I'm currently making this video. 11 months ago, so it's been about a year since Ran has been released, right? Ran's return banner was finally here just a banner cycle ago, so around the same time as DN. Ran has been, no pun intended, but running around and is very, very strong. Now, one of the things I said in this video, as you can see in the title, I said unsustainable power creep. It was Ran was the beginning. Ran was the hero that I predicted that we're gonna have like this insanely crazy power creep. And one of the things I said in the video, I'm not gonna get you to watch a video that I made a year ago, but one of the things I said in the video, which turns out to be true, is again, I said if heroes all have higher base speed, but then all have loaded kits, as in like, you know, do you want an immunity buffer? Use Ran, right? Because he's so fast, he'll always get it off. You want a attack buffer, you want a defense breaker, you want a strip, go to Ran, right? And then I was predicting that when heroes get a loaded kit with their high base speeds, why use anything slower, right? And then we saw that to be the case after Ran came out, C. Lilius came out, Peyra came out, and in all those videos I was basically kind of tying the threads, right? Tying the threads since this Ran video about this is what I said would happen. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, I'm a prophet, and it's not like, you know, people didn't predict this either. It's not like it's my own prediction, but I really did see this gonna be an issue, right? So the question now is, now we do know that Lua is quite fast. Now, not the fastest, but since Ran's release, the desire to get speed gear has just been, you know, a lot higher. Okay, I know that a lot of players used to be Banshee mains, have converted to Wyvern. Now, a lot of people have not converted to Wyvern yet, and that's fine, but it's just, it's very powerful, right? The first turn has always been powerful, but having heroes with loaded kits with high base speeds it's just too crazy, right? This is one reason why like Green Bazaar is a lot less played now. Not only does he have like, you know, Emma Cowrick and all these other counters to deal with, it's just that he doesn't bring enough anymore, right? But before, in the past, Soul Burn, unbuffable, like Soul Burn ignored effect resistance, pushback, strip, and unbuffable used to be so crazy, but you know, Basar still could be that good if he had higher base speed to contest. And but then we got the Paras and we got the Sea Lilius. Okay, so with that being like said, let's talk about the Lua hero. I will say this though, right? Because of Sea Lilius, because of Ran, because of Para, because of Leica having an EE, because of Sid having an EE, and players like farming way harder for speed gear. Again, players have always been farming for speed gear, but I would say that the emphasis on getting high speed pieces, high speed heroes built has never been this crazy like ever before. Last season we saw a bit of it when Amelias were running at 300 speed, right? 300 speed, but we had a 15 speed frenzy for Soul Weavers. And then at the end of that, we had the DN buff with EE, and the DN became meta. And then the Soul Weavers had base speed adjustments. And then now we're at 7 speed frenzy. But like players are just like building their, you know, DJBs on like a broken set with speed set, building their DNs on broken set, speed set, anything to chase the highest end speed. That tells you something, that those heroes individually, they're all like very powerful, right? They all bring a different aspect, but the common thread is they get first turn, or if not the first turn, at least very quickly it's gonna get the second turn, right? So on to Lua. Okay, so Lua is a Ranger Pisces Ice. This is a brand new star sign. Again, I think it's on the 4th anniversary of Epic 7 now, 4 years of Epic 7. They are releasing heroes of different classes with the different star signs. So we're definitely seeing different combinations of their stat lines. Looking at Lua's stat line, this is pretty good, right? This is like pretty good. The attack is slightly on the lower side, but you know, not a lot of Rangers hold that kind of attack anyway. Slightly lower than someone like an SSB, but is 993. The health is pretty good, and the defense is also very solid. So 6,000 health, 120 base speed, and then 611 defense. This is a very solid stat line. If I'm not mistaken, this is comparable to Sea Lilius. Like if we're talking about 1-for-1, Sea Lilius being a warrior, Aquarius warrior, defense, HP, it's almost on par. Speed is 1 speed slower than Sea Lilius. So if you can imagine the players having the ability to build a 310 Sea Lilius, if they have, let's assume they don't have another set, but let's be real, like a lot of the top end spenders or top end players have enough speed gear to go around, especially when Lua most likely won't be a high speed DPS. So in terms of just gear rarity, and this is just setting up context for players who may kind of be mid-game listening to this video. For end gamers, apologies, because you know, I just always assume that maybe my viewers are gonna be always learning as well, right, why these things are happening. So in terms of like high speed gear, you can accelerate high speed, and high speed support gear is going to be much easier to get than high speed DPS gear. And the main reason is because in high speed DPS gear, you're going to need stats like, you know, crit rate, crit damage, and attack, or maybe even some flat attack, but you also need high speed. So in terms of the probability of getting those substats aligned and then rolling, let's say 3, 4, even 5 speed rolls and high rolls, it's much more rare. So when an account like an Asia Whale account, or even if you're a lucky SOB, if you have an insane, like let's say like 310 Sid, 320 Ran, and they actually do damage, then you're one of the minority, because again, you had to go through so many RNG hoops and you actually hit the jackpot, right? When we're talking about building someone like a Sea Lilius, like a Para, like a Lua, like some people ran Para, some people ran Sea Lilius without effectiveness, right? It's just because they couldn't get the right gear or the right substats, but more or less you're gonna get some kind of bulk, right? In terms of like a support speedy hero, you're gonna have like main stat defense, health, percent, and flat. You're gonna have ER, you're gonna have effectiveness, and there's just more probability, more possibility for your, especially your right side gear, to be rolling high speed, right? With something that's, you know, borderline usable. Like for example, like my DN is using like a flat health neck. But to chase the speed for this specific meta, I sacrificed the the additional like roughly 15% HP that you could get from a 60% or 65% base stat. My point being is that I think Lua is going to be very powerful, and it's just because of especially top end players are going to have higher accessibility to the gear to make her usable. Again, like I said, the example is if someone can make a 310C Lilius, then realistically you can make a 310 Lua. And if Lua is at 310 speed and she has access to Guiding Light, she has access to her own artifact, which is a different type of broken. I'll talk about that as well. But and she's bulky, so you look at the base stats, she's pretty bulky. She can ignore effect resist with soul burning. She has imprint concentration with effectiveness. There's just a lot going for her. So she's not just going to be a supporter kind of debuffer, like disabler. She's also going to be able to do damage, and I'm going to talk about that, of course. So oh yeah, I should talk about the imprints too. I mean, it's not terrible, right? Self-imprint concentration of 27%. It fits her role very nicely. The crit rate is also nice, but I would say somewhat more niche. If it was HP percent, defense percent, in my opinion, OP, right? So being able to swap the imprint concentration to the imprint release at a whim. The imprint concentration of the 17 crit rate is gonna definitely lose some value. I just can't really imagine you needing that over the effectiveness in most cases, because generally you're gonna be building your team with ideally 100% crit rate, right? For the odd cases, maybe like a C-Dom or maybe a Zahawk, depending, I don't know, you might not have 100%, and so therefore you would swap it, but because it's 2 slot and such high crit rate, it does lose value instead of, let's say, a AoE crit rate, but even though it's at a lower percent, if you know what I mean. But I would just safe to say that if people are gonna imprint her, whether through slates, depending on how effective she will be, whether through dupes, it's definitely, I think the effectiveness is gonna be the higher value. So first things first is talking about the second skill. So the S2 Butterfly Reverie attacks the enemy with light, dispelling 2 buffs, and before putting them to sleep for 1 turn, grants an extra turn to the caster. So dispelling 2 buffs before sleeping and also grants extra turn to the caster. Now in the demo, in their video, they have it against a Politis. As you see, their Politis on the top slot on the opponent's side, and she's put to sleep. Because her S3 is a non-attack skill, so of course it would trigger Politis. Now the thing is though, you can, like with high enough effectiveness, even certain ER scenarios, it's just not gonna cut it, you know what I mean? Like, so let's assume she has 150 effectiveness. Your opponent will have to make sure she has at least 250 ER, right? To guarantee that they won't fall asleep. So like if you bring Lua into Politis, I think it's obvious. It's like almost like they designed it to counter Politis. I don't believe this would work if it's versus, like, let's say Green Celine, right? I do believe Celine cleanses before, so she would cleanse the sleep, so you can't really put her to sleep. You also would not be able to, it does grant an extra turn, so if you put, let's say, Bunny Dom to sleep, your second turn will automatically trigger her immunity and barrier buff, but she won't be able to S3, so there's that benefit. The reason is because Bunny Dom's passive is like a passive. It's not a skill, so I believe it would trigger. So this is something I would want to keep in mind and just bring to the forefront here. The skill 2, we have the data mine because I'm making this video quite late now, but we have the data mine. The skill 2 is at a 1.5 times mod, which is pretty strong. The only issue is that if you look at her base damage again, you have no extra crit rate, you have no extra crit damage, her base attack is low. Although you have a 1.5 times mod, you also have a 40% raw damage into Mola. I don't know if her role will ever sway into damage dealer, because realistically her greatest output in damage would be the S2, but then she's functionally more like a disabler with her S3, which her S3 doesn't do damage, and her S1, yes, while it does defense break, so Unfortunately, I feel that if her kit is really loaded and maybe Smile gets afraid of her being too OP, like I guess this is a good option. Give her like a really high damage S2 with even higher like raw damage in terms of the Mola. But I would say that if you're going to use her as a disabler, then you know that's really good because you actually don't need to Mola the S2 at all. Even though it has high damage mods, you won't really need to Mola this. So realistically, she could be kept as a very cheap skill enhancement hero, which means that your priority is to level 10 friendship her right away if you min-max Mola. Okay, if you min-max Mola. So skill 3, so this is pretty good. Okay, this is really good. Dispelling 2 buffs, right? So dispel 2 buffs is always pretty good. That means that you can, you know, dispel FCC barrier with immunity, and it would, you know, put that Politis or whatnot into a more undesirable state. Okay. Skill 3, Sweet Talk, dispels 1 buff from all enemies before increasing cooldowns by 1 turn and inflicting Beguile. Increases speed of all allies for 2 turns, and then ignores effect resistance if you soul burn. It does take 20 souls, of course. So if you pair her like how many of the cleavers are doing these days, really, you know, non-attack skills right now is pretty strong. Like DJB is really strong into like someone like a Politis, but if you have an Edda with DJB, you know, you get your damage off, you'll be able to get to cleave off. And C Lilius, Diane with Edda is all pretty strong right now. Lua, I think, is going to be this in the same scenario. Now, I personally think that, you know, it can't just be all Edda, right? So this skill itself, in my opinion, is still very good. Dispels 1 buff from all enemies before increasing the skill cooldown. This dispel in their combat demonstration video, they brought her into someone like Remnant Violet. So in terms of Remnant Violet's case, she would dispel, but this is an unattacking skill. So that means it's a soft active skill. F Clury, S3, all that stuff. It would trigger the Politis, like I said. It would trigger Celine. It would trigger Taeyu, but I should just mention Taeyu just because he does get triggered by this. But even though he's not really meta at the moment. But you'll be able to land this debuff Beguile without touching them. Right, so the only way for you not to actually land like the dispel and all that stuff is effect resistance or a resistance check. But if you soul burn, you ignore the effect resistance, so your opponents are, no matter what, going to have 1 buff dispel removed. Remnant Violet's evasion would be gone. Right, so it's not a turn reduction. Right, so as so popular these days with like Peyra and the old Cerise when Cerise was meta, and C Lilius, but it is complete like removal of that buff, and then increasing the skill cooldown by 1 turn. Now a lot of people are thinking like, oh, it's not a big deal because like J Kisei's not meta. While that seems to be like a probability, I think that her access to Guiding Light is a big one for her survival and her continual annoyance, if I could put it that way. Because when we get to the skill 1 as well, it's pretty disgusting skill 1. But the S3, like, you can soul burn it, and it's an untouchable skill, and you cast this debuff called Beguile. Now Beguile is like, if you read it, it seems like a mouthful, and it was kind of confusing. I had to watch it a couple times to really understand what's happening with Beguile. So I'll actually go through those frames here when we get to this. But Beguile, it reads, at the end of the turn, deals additional damage to all allies of the target, except the target equivalent to the 10% of the respective max health. In case I just butchered that, let me reread it again, because I think I did. At the end of the turn, deals additional damage to all allies of the target, except for the target, equivalent to 10% of their respective max health. Beguile effect applies to heroes only, and is dispelled once the effect is activated. So it acts kind of like Sharoon's what is that? Is it Toxic or something? Toxin or something? It's kind of like a poison, okay? But it doesn't leave them with injury. So in this screenshot, we have the Beguile casted. Lua had just did the S3. Oh wait, you know what? I'm jumping ahead. Speed buff for all allies for 2 turns is also big. Okay, I have to say that. Like, she's... think about it like a C. Lilius in a way, right? You have like 2 turns, and both turns are crippling the opponent in both turns. Okay, so like C. Lilius has that benefit. Yes, they're different mechanics, but C. Lilius got the vigor buff. She's got the speed buff. C. Lilius got attack down dispel or turn buff, duration reduction by 1 turn, and attack down. And she has a sleep on the S2 into this S3, dispels 1 buff, and increase speed, and you land Beguile. Okay, so Beguile is this debuff that you see here with that little spiral. And so what's happening here is that everyone got Beguiled, right? So I forgot who was actually had first turn, but either way, they actually in their video in this where I captured the screenshot, they skipped it. But this is the important part. These 2. Okay, these 2 are the most important part. Everybody has gotten Beguiled. Okay. And when Beguile triggers, so this one's a really good example because we only see Politis. Politis is paralyzed, so her turn just ended. Beguile triggers, because again, the turn ended, and 10% of the opponent's HP, except her own, gets dealt. So in reality, what this skill is, it's a minor damage. And of course, it's, you know, a 10% HP is 10% HP. Obviously the higher HP they have, they lose more health. Now that can interplay with, you know, better with true damage like skills. So let's say for example, you're not cleaving with Lua and you do this 10%, right? So this 10% is a big chunk, and then you follow up with like an ADS, and ADS has a fixed damage as well, right? So it, in terms of like that kind of damage from a 10% loss is quite big. Okay, now no matter what I'm talking about here is that she does a skill that can ignore effect resistance, and that can do damage no matter what, unless it's dispelled. Okay, unless they have a cleanser and it cleanses away the Beguile. That's the only way that it doesn't like trigger. But as soon as your opponents, I think in their, yeah, they had Rem. So they don't really have a cleanser here, right? Everyone got Beguiled. And so realistically what's going to happen is that if Rem gets Beguile, 10% done to C. Lilius, Politis, A. Ravi. When C. Lilius goes and gets Beguiled, 10% damage to Politis, A. Ravi, Rem. And then when A. Ravi goes, 10%, blah, blah, blah. You get the picture. Realistically, what you're looking at here is 30% lost health on everyone, or technically it'd be 40, assuming that none of them get cleansed, right? So 40% of the team-wide HP is gone based on this. So is that broken? Maybe not, because let's, you know, people always say that, oh, immunity is not important because, you know, we all have access to cleansers. I think to be honest, like, it's situational. If we're talking about World Arena, sometimes you just can't guarantee 2 cleansers, right? Like maybe you just don't have enough damage or something, you know? So I think Beguile, the debuff, is quite powerful, especially loaded with an S3 that, one, you know, makes sure that if soul burnt, it all gets through, right? And increasing the skill cooldown as well for 1 turn means that hand guy cannot cleanse it, right? So just putting that out there, you can't really cleanse the Beguile. So if you do that, right? At least not to my knowledge. And since it's untouchable, someone like an Edward or a Tywin or something doesn't cleanse it unless you touch them, right? So all that being said, I feel that it's pretty loaded, pretty good. And then skill 1. Skill 1, you have +5, so you most likely want to +5 this, and then you will want to skill enhance this. I think that's really it. So in terms of a seemingly very effective hero, it's quite a low Mola cost for her. And like I said, if you're min-maxing Mola, always level 10 friendship first for support characters if you're not going to plan to +15. The S1 has a damage mod as well, of course, because it's a damaging skill. It is a 1x mod, power is at a 0.95. Nothing too amazing compared to the S2, but again, I don't think you would build her as a damage dealer, so let's just put that out of the window. So if you do up to +5, it is a 50% chance to defense break for 2 turns. 2-turn defense break is quite disgusting in my opinion. Now do recall, if you can build her at like, let's say 300 speed, 310 speed, after Beguile turn she also has speed buff, right? So like, and if she's protected by guiding light or something like that, then she's gonna lap around and then do your defense break for 2 turns. If you have a hand guy versus Lua, you got your skill cooldown reset, you can't cleanse it off, you can't shake it off unless you got a Crimson Seed on your Aravi or something like that. I don't know, man. 2-turn defense break sounds pretty disgusting. Sounds pretty crazy, because like you got 1-turn defense breaks on like Sid, you got 1-turn defense breaks on like an Alencia, but 2-turn defense break without a cleanse, that's an ouchie ouch. Like your opponent who gets defense broken is most likely going to die. So overall, I think, you know, okay, we'll talk about the artifact as a separate thing, but overall, I think as a hero, she seems pretty strong. It seems like it seems that they have designed her to deal with the counters that would be usually brought into someone like her. So again, my example for the hand guy, cause skill reset, actually on a green violet. Green violet, oh bro, I didn't even think about that. Green violet, even on immunity, you strip, you skill cooldown, his dodge is only based on his MLDB, right? So like even though she's blue, she could put Politis to sleep, right? So it feels like they designed her almost to be like a decent hero into the heroes that would counter her. So that's where I feel like her strong suit will come in very big. And then if you're not convinced that she's really good, I personally think we're desensitized by these high speed heroes, right? High speed heroes. Because of Ran, when Ran was introduced, I don't think, you know, half the people probably thought that Ran was insanely strong, and I think he just got stronger as people's gear got better. And then Sea Lilies came out, and then Payra came out, and then we're just desensitized to this kind of like, and then the frenzy I mentioned before with the Soul Weavers, DJB running rampant, DN very strong. You know, we're just getting these like really strong openers now that just forces even some turn 2 players to struggle a bit, right? Let's just be real. I think your struggle versus like Cleave and, you know, Stray's getting buffed and all that stuff is not really gonna help the cause, to be honest. But your opponents who are more aggro and Cleave oriented, it's just going to be much stronger with her being able to disable on turn 1, but then also set up some crazy damage. I think there's a lot that she'll bring to the table, even just looking at her right now. But I think if you're watching this video, you're not convinced about her being really strong, I think it's really, we're desensitized. Everything is too strong, you know? Everything with turn 1 is too strong right now. I think we're just desensitized, but only time will tell. I personally think that, you know, based on my knowledge of, you know, players' gear level, and then how just, you know, the current meta is at the moment and how effective Sea Lilius Ran are still being, even with Edward, even with all those like, you know, so on so called counters, I think she's gonna be very strong. Now, I would almost compare her to how I initially rated Politis. When Politis first came out, my initial thoughts was she was right before a limited banner. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that limited hero being quite important for new players to get. So I think my initial thoughts video for Politis was something along the lines that like, too bad a limited banner is coming, or like she has a limited kit or something. But either way, Politis had, to me, a limited heroes kit. Lua is not a limited hero, but I feel the same way for her banner as a whole compared to Politis. Now, you might not think that her kit is limited worthy compared to someone like a Politis, right? Which now has really proven to be an annoyance. Politis is very, very strong, that she's definitely up there in terms of pre-bans. for specific styles of play. But Lua, if you're not convinced that her kit is as good as Politis or equivalent to Politis, you have to consider her artifact. So Knowledge Seed with Politis definitely dropped the banner's value, but I think this Spatial Temporal Fan ups Lua's value. So I'm already convinced that Lua is a really good character in general, but I'm more convinced you have to pull on this banner because of this artifact as well. So this artifact increases effectiveness by 20%, which is really strong. And because okay, so one thing with artifacts these days and how Epic 7 is buffing artifacts is definitely giving the artifact some base stats. Like gear score is forever, right? They can make a broken mechanic on an artifact, I suppose, but having stats or gear score in general is just gonna be a really hard selling point on top of some kind of crazy mechanic in the artifact. Hence, Alensa Nox's Wrath is so good on Alencia compared to before. You get the straight up stats. Wind Rider, insanely good. You get the straight up stats before the conditions are met. You get additional stats after. All that kind of stuff, right? This is kind of like the trend for their artifacts, and hers just hits the mark. You get effectiveness for her. You could use it on Leica as well. People are saying Leica is gonna be really good with this, and I think so too. This range artifact using, we'll look at the max level. After using a non-attack skill, has a 100% chance, so up to 100% chance, to grant stealth to the ally except the caster with the highest attack for 2 turns. Can only be activated once every 4 turns. But the thing is, with her type of setup, with Leica's setup, you're most likely going to be like drafting in World Arena in a way where it's going to be super beneficial to get the stealth. And keep in mind, it is a 2-turn stealth, all right? It's not a willy-nilly 1-turn stealth. It's a 2-turn stealth. So like it can be very, very supporter. And like I said, because of the kind of aggressive nature right now in World Arena, I think that this really lends well to that, especially let's say someone who has so in Leica's case, because Leica draws a dual attack, you can go to let someone with someone who can CR boost on the S1 or something, right? Have the protection from the stealth. In my opinion, it's a must-have artifact. Now, whether you max limit break this, that will be up to debate. Obviously, you don't want RNG on your side. RNG to fail on your side. So if you are a whale, obviously max limit broken is not a bad thing. If you're a light spender, I mean, obviously pull on Lua's banner. I would suggest this, and then hopefully you get an artifact. You should also pick up the Powder Shop artifact when it is out, in my opinion. Even though at the moment of this recording, there's a Wind Rider, and Wind Rider is really good, don't get me wrong, but I think the benefit of this artifact is that if you only get a plus 15, so in terms of 1 copy, you max it, plus 15, it's 75% chance to proc. There is a high probability that will happen, right? So in terms of like, let's say something like Guiding Light at max level is 70%, okay? So this, just 1 copy plus 15 is 75%. I would almost say that if you have the ability to have multiples of this, at least keep 2, maybe 3 copies of this artifact, and don't worry about the max limit broken yet. Maybe just get the copies first, and then if this proves to be really, really good, especially for future rangers, you start bottling it, right? Even though it's not a limited artifact, but sometimes it's important to have a 100% chance to proc. The amazing thing is that if you do get this max limit broken, it's 100%, right? Instead of like Guiding Light, even if it's max, it's still 70% at the like maximum, right? So in terms of like a full setup with a ranger that does non-attack skill, that could be high base speed. So Leica, definitely up there. I believe Leica is technically 125 base speed, right? Because I think Leica is 115 and then plus a 10 speed EE. So like Leica would really love this. Okay, like Leica doesn't necessarily need a Guiding Light, but for someone like Lua, maybe her best in slot will still be Guiding Light instead of this. So, but just in case you have some crazy gear for Lua, you have some crazy setup you have in mind with Lua, maybe this isn't a bad thing to have on her as well. So that's why I'm saying that at least minimally 2 copies if possible, if your bookmarks allow, if your luck allows, and then of course get the powder shop one. So that's my full thoughts on Lua. I think that she is looking very strong, and again, going down this trend of Epic 7, you know, my final thoughts is really this, is that Epic 7 is releasing seemingly like very packed kits on turn 1 heroes, and then they're nerfing heroes like Hua Yang, who is only really good into second turn. So it's kind of weird, right? Like, it's almost like they want players to play more first turn. I know the joke has been going around like cash game, right? Everybody has to get speed gear, but it tends to be it's seemingly to be the case, and I'm more convinced so with Lua being released after Ran, Lilius, Peyra, and then the frenzy was for Soul Weaver. I'm very convinced that they just want us to get speed gear, really. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think about Lua? Do you think she's actually broken, like good, like I said? Do you think she's not that good? Let me know your thoughts, and I'd love to read your comments. For the video recording, I'm going to end this here. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server. Follow me on Twitter and subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next Epic 7 video.